shall be given to the hunter who brings me the hearth of Tarcyr. But know this. Only the strong survive my march of sacrifice.
What up guys, White Lycan here. Today I'm bringing you a guide to soloing the March of Sacrifices. Today I'll be focusing on mostly the boss battles. I'll be talking about the mechanics, and I'll be giving you my own personal perspective on how I was able to survive each of them. If you want to skip to any specific boss, there are timestamps in the link below. Whilst we run through the build in the background, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown as to why I put together this video. So I've always played Werewolf in Elder Scrolls Online, and so I'm naturally drawn to this dungeon. Generally I really enjoy it. I've run it on no death, hard mode and speedrun, and I find the mechanics interesting and challenging. But one thing I have noticed that if you're running it to collect the gear in the instance, it can be really hard to find like a decent team to run it through with. If you search via the dungeon finder for a group, you're often waiting long periods of time before you actually get a group, and then that's not any reassurance that you'll actually make it to the end or actually be doing it with people who will actually share up gear afterwards. So it can be quite frustrating. Like even on a day where it's the daily pledge, it still can be difficult to find a decent group. You know, don't get me wrong, if you can get a group of mates together and run it through a few times, you know, to pick up the sets you need, it's going to be far more beneficial for you. But if you've had it with pugs and you're feeling up for a challenge, you know, this could be the video for you. So as you can see, my base build is Stamplar with my werewolf set up, not too far off current meta. Obviously that may change when Greymoor comes out later on next month. So let's check out some of the drop sets that can be found in this dungeon. So if you look here, obviously Blood Moon being the one that you would be looking for a werewolf build. And then we can cast our eye over the bosses that we're going to encounter. They're in order, obviously, with the red bosses being the ones that I found the most difficult encounters. Following on from that, we're looking at trash mobs. There's ultimately nothing too dangerous within the dungeon. I didn't really struggle with too much. Watch out, however, for some of the AoEs, because they can be quite nasty if you don't block. The Lurcher also does a ranged one-shot that you'll need to dodge roll. Cool. So with that, let's get it. First up, we got the Wyress Sisters. And I have to say that this one is a bit of a stage gate. So in this fight, you're dealing with a tank, healer, and ranged DPS. Sort of very similar to the standard kind of dungeon party, really. So basically, there are two main things to watch out for here. You have the tank, and as you just saw there, the tank will every now and again he'll do a heavy attack that you can see him one up. He just did it again there. And effectively, you need to step out of that, especially if you've not got anywhere near as much health and armor as, say, like a tank. That will literally one-shot you. But all the while, at the same time, what's happening here is actually you're potentially getting one-shotted by the ranged DPS, who does a charge shot just like you saw there every now and again also. So you're looking out for these two one-shots that you need to be dodging, and the way that you do that is you keep the ranged DPS in sight, and you obviously are focusing on the tank. The reason why it's good to focus on the tank to start with is because really they're the most dangerous of the NPCs within this battle, because they'll charge you just like you saw there, and then they'll very quickly pull off that one shot, and so trying to get them down as quickly as possible really is your main aim here. Whilst at the moment, just keeping an eye out for that heavy attack. The other thing that's quite difficult about this battle is that you're on the floor, you've got like a slowing effect that takes place around the tank, and because the tank is really trying to aggro you the entire time, it means that you're slowed quite a lot of the time, and so I'm using quite a lot of my stamina at the moment to literally just try and get out of that slowing effect so I can escape from the heavy attack. So ultimately you're just backing away from the tank and you're just trying to keep your distance whilst putting a dot on them every now and again. And there you go, the tank just went down. So once the tank is down, really within this battle, because the most dangerous thing about the battle is with the amount of damage that you're taking and the one-shots whilst the tank is up. Once the tank is down, really, this battle is over. Like, so now I'm focusing on the ranged DPS. She can't do anything to me, really. I mean, she can't touch me in terms of damage. The only thing that she can do is one-shot me. And because I'm close enough to be able to stun her or to dodge roll, you know, she really has nothing that she can do that can hurt me, really. So, and if we're looking at the healer behind, you can see also they're doing an amount of damage, and they're trying desperately to heal the various other two, but never really successfully, just due to the amount of damage that I'm currently doing at the moment. Again, I'm Spectre, sort of like a DD within this fight, so that allows me to obviously do more damage with a dot and more damage just generally with proccing Blood Moon that they can heal through. So again, the ranged DPS is down now, and now we're just looking at just like go through the motions of taking down the healer. So just one last thing to summarise this battle. Effectively, heavy attack is your friend. Every time you do a heavy attack, as I mentioned, you get the splash damage, but really it's restoring that stamina, and the amount of stamina that you burn through during that period of time when you're taking all of the damage, you're trying to dodge roll all the time. You really need to be throwing in those heavy attacks every other attack, or sometimes just spamming them over and over again to get through it. Cool. So next up is Aghaedh. That's the best pronunciation gonna get out of me, I'm afraid. It's basically just a juiced up Spriggan. Now I would say that this boss is particularly all that hard. In fact, if I was running it in a group, you know, even if I'm running on vet, it's really just a straight up burn. There is a mechanic to it, and I'll talk about the mechanic in a second, but really what you should be looking to do if your Spectres a DD here is just try and burn the boss down. The thing is lurchers will spawn of different colours, and they'll try and one-shot you with the heavy attacks. They're quite well publicised, they're quite easy to dodge, so you can sort of rotate around the main boss there. So the actual mechanic is that the lurchers, when they die, will actually drop these colours on the floor that you can see there, and if you were a team of 4, each member of the team picks up that colour. And during a phase where you'll see colours emitting in all different corners of the arena, like you're seeing now, you basically would just have to go and stand in the corner, corresponding corner. However, because I, especially in werewolf form, I'm just a little bit more tanky, I had a dot which was the Claws of Life, which is also healing me, and I have quite a strong self-heal as a werewolf. I didn't really need to bother with that. I managed to heal through it, so but do watch out for that heavy attack, because it's quite nasty, and yeah, it can hit you hard if you're not ready for it. Our next opponent is Dagrund, probably butchering that one as well, to be fair. But he's apparently descended from werebears. I really think that ESO missed a trick here, because there's no werebear action whatsoever. So, you know, I marked this one as a green fight. I have done this twice now on solo, and I really have not struggled either time. The thing is, if you understand the mechanics of the thing, it's really quite an easy fight to solo. So basically, the mechanics are as follows. The boss will try to do a heavy attack and one-shot you. He'll do various AoEs on the floor. At some point he'll jump up into the sky and then come back down and do sort of like a radial AoE on the floor as well that you have to avoid. There's quite a lot of dodge rolling and just kind of like backing away from him, really. But the most important bit about this fight, by far, is keeping on top of the ads as a individual, as a single person without a healer. I just healed myself. If I didn't kill the ads as quickly as I have done, I'd end up with a situation where I was just taking too much damage from the boss and from individual archers. There are, I believe, like a two-handed NPC as well as an archer, and just basically, if you see an NPC that's not the boss, you have to kill it, and you have to kill it quickly, because the damage will start to add up. But if you stay on top of them, as soon as they spawn in, and just keeping one eye on the boss, making sure to, dodge roll out of those heavy attacks, or block even, seem to be able to save me there. And I'm not, even spec'd as a tank currently. As I said, nothing really to worry about too much. Quite an enjoyable fight, if you like kind of moving out of AoEs and just checking your position. But yeah, relatively easy. The next boss may look like My Little Pony on the outside, but actually she's one of the more difficult challenges within this dungeon. One of the most interesting things is you cannot remain in werewolf form during this boss, because there's a section that causes you to have to hide and werewolves can't crouch. You need to come out of werewolf form. So this prompted me to actually change my setup so that I could be a little bit more resistant to some of the damage that I was taking. My CP has remained entirely the same, but I've swapped in Briarheart, some heavy Hunting's Rage to keep that crit high, and I'm also using a two-handed sword now, and that's really for the gap closer, because Tarcyr, she kind of likes to jump around within the arena, and keeping your damage, especially if you're melee damage primarily, so continually damaging her is really important. So we've come into the battle here. We're past the first section where we would have gone through a period of burning the boss, and then going through another stage of hiding, and I'll explain that mechanic as we go through. At the moment, what I'm trying to do here is just keep my distance from the AoEs, and when I see the opportunity, kind of get close and do as much damage as I can. Tarcyr does a series of attacks in sequence, all based on the elements, and most of which they aren't actually too strong. There's one that she does where she kind of fires a beam from her forehead, exactly like you just saw there. That can do quite a high amount of damage if your health is somewhere near sort of like halfway. That can wipe you out. So yeah, just watch out for that one specifically. I'm pretty sure you can dodge roll that one. So yeah, just keeping distance from AoEs really, and just keeping on the boss. There are ants within this part of the fight, and it should be said they do quite a lot of damage. And so if you see them, the priority is to get them down. They're like guys with like knives in their hands. But yeah, I mean, even if you were doing this as a group, the priority is always to focus on those ads within that period, because they just add to the level of damage, and ultimately they can cause a wipe. So you can see when they're just spawning in. So you see that heavy attack as well that she's doing, causing a little bit of damage, nothing too major. Again, the problem comes with the amount of damage that just kind of stacks up bit by bit over time. And you just saw there, basically what I've done is I've used my ultimate, my werewolf, to fall back to that when I felt like I didn't have enough stamina to keep myself healed. So that's actually a good, pretty good tactic. Within a round of damaging Tarcyr, you can charge your ultimate, your werewolf ultimate, and then just use it as like a fallback, you know, should you start dropping, your health start dropping too low. Because obviously within werewolf you have that magicka pool of which to be able to start healing yourself instantly, and you become more resistant. During this phase, after you've done a certain amount of damage to Tarcyr, again she'll disappear, and you'll have to follow this wisp around and use synergy to just keep propelling it round every time it stops, whilst kind of like dodging out of the way of the various different obstacles and things. Honestly, this is the easiest part of the mechanic. It's just a case of just keeping yourself moving, really. Surviving the damage is the most difficult bit, just because of how much it stacks up, and I was quite surprised by that, because I never really struggled with the damage amount, the damage element, even just running this with like straight group of DDs. Never really struggled with that before. I guess it's because it's all focused, you know, it's all focused on me. I just find without swapping in like a heavy set and Briarheart and Troll King, I couldn't survive that amount of damage throughout the battle, and keep doing the level of damage to the boss that you need to like really get through the fight. So the lightning attack that she's doing now, normally I would be running straight up to her and doing as much damage as I possibly could, because that attack actually doesn't seem to do a huge amount of damage to me. But I had allowed the adds to stack up, and just the combined damage together almost down me, you can see in that section there. So just trying to stay as mobile as possible, and ultimately, yeah, dying with a ranged attack. Lastly, we come to Balorgh, the final boss. I should just mention that I've swapped my gear set back to the more DD based set that I was wearing earlier. Honestly, I didn't really find this battle all that difficult, and if you've gotten this far, honestly, the worst is behind you. He does some pretty high damage attacks in and around him. They're fairly well publicised, the worst of which is definitely that cone away AoE that he does as he runs towards you. After around 10%, you'll go into this kind of ethereal kind of mode, where the boss will basically be drawn to as he always would be, but what you have to do is try and guide him, as I just did, into that kind of blue light, and that becomes more visible the longer you're there. So trying to stay out of that, particularly that kind of circular AoE that he does that every time he comes out of that mode, and that can be quite nasty. Yeah, as I mentioned beforehand, just running at that cone away AoE, so you're kind of out of it for the longest period of time, or if you're on the edge of it, just back away from it. Once again, entering that kind of spectral realm, you'll be able to see clearly where the boss is, because his eyes glow in the distance. They glow like a red, and so when you see that, you can visibly see that he's coming towards you, and just guide him straight into the blue area once again. So there's two main mechanics outside of that mode. There's the essentially heal summon venom plants, which produce like a poison, as you can see here on the islands, and they make the islands unnavigable. He'll also do exactly the same thing if his health stays up long enough for him not to go back into the spectral form, which he's done here. He'll actually summon lightning, and that'll have the same effect. It'll kill you if you're within the water, so you have to stand on the islands, basically. The two audio cues you're looking for is I'll choke you all out, which is the queue for the mushrooms to spawn on the islands, and even lightning obeys me now, which is obviously I'm calling down the lightning on the water. So in this battle, just because of how squishy he is, we never got anywhere near the lightning, kind of part of the phase. So yeah, my main takeaways from this particular boss would just be to watch your positioning on the ground. When Balorgh gets around 10%, he'll start summoning walls around him, and he won't stop summoning them. That's the end mechanic. What you need to do is effectively just burn the boss. Once again, they're just trying to escape the cone of AoE, and I've got a dot on the boss, so I know it's pretty low health, so just letting that dot do its work, and there you go. That's the March of Sacrifices complete solo. Thanks for coming with me on this journey. I hope it was informative and helpful. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to give it a like and subscribe. I'd like to just take a very quick second to thank Fighting Tyler, which is the band you hear in the background. I'll post a link to the band in the chat below. Thanks for joining me once again, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.